All right, Joellen, what are these bad plants doing here with us?
We have to show the bad with the good.
Oh, so it's the bad with the good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of these bad plants that we have
Well,
here.
the first one here is a beauty of the, it would be it's not a bad shape for a boxwood of this size, but the color is terrible. It's not green, for one thing. And so I would avoid plants that in a nursery that are, not a nice solid color green like they're supposed to be.
Okay.
So yeah, I would avoid this plant. I don't know if it's from winter or if it has a disease. It's hard to tell, but I would wait till some nice green ones came in to choose those and would not pick this one.
You would not pick this one, all right.
And then this one here, I mean, it's really sparse. And, you want to shake a plant too, make sure there's no white flies on it and inspect them, make sure there's no aphids sitting on them, because that's a common problem in nurseries of plants that have been there for a while that might look like this. Also here, they've got some weeds in the top, and then look at the roots are all coming out of the base of the plant. So that means this plant is most likely root bound. And if we can lift it up a little bit, we see how root bound it actually is. One thing is, though, with the bad roots, there are some good, nice colored roots, so might have possibility with this one, but I would rather buy one that doesn't have as many problems. Next, we want to make sure there's no leaf spot diseases on them, like powdery mildew or these leaf spot diseases. And of course, this shape is not good. It's not nice and even. It's not a good coloration. It's got diseases, and it's got a few weeds on top. But when let's see if we can.
Yeah, can you get it out of
this
here?
is the thing. It must have been in the nursery a while because it's definitely root bound. And when we take the container off, we see there's very few roots that are alive. They're mostly all got a brown color on them, which means they have root rot. And this plant has got lots of problems. And I would just try to avoid plants like this in the landscape. I don't want to bring it home. Taking the plant out of the container, I mean, you should be able to do that at a nursery because you want to look at the root system. You're buying the root system and the top. You want to make sure the root system doesn't have rotted roots like this one has. So when to do that. Now you see the circling roots in all of these? Plants want to anchor themselves in the ground. So they try to take their roots away from the center of the plant. Well, what happens when they're in any kind of container, whether it's a round container or a square container, they hit the sides of the container and then they start making the shape of the container. And sometimes you can buy plants that are like, if the top looks good and it's got a little bit too many roots in it, sometimes I will buy them and then you can score them at least 4 places because that stops that circling because all the roots tend to want to anchor and grow away from the plant. So when you cut it, it stops that circling pattern.
That's good.
Old wounds. If you've looked at especially the base of the trees and large shrubs, and make sure there's no old wounds there because you want the plant to take all of its energy to establish in your yard, not fixing old wounds. And the same is true for suckers on trees and shrubs. I mean, if you have a whole row to choose from, and some have suckers and some don't get the ones with suckers because they're going to continue to want to be there. You would prefer a tree that doesn't have suckers on it. And severely crossing branches. You don't want to start with a problem of a crossing branch. And so, and that also goes with the shape of the plant too. So don't get a tree or a large shrub that has crossing branches in it. Staked plants. There's a lot of staked plants. And there's nothing wrong with staking, but you've got to look for a few things. If you have a large plant in a container and it has a stake against it that looks old, and you can actually try to see the stake tie actually getting into the bark of the plant. And if you release it and you look at it, you can see the impression of the tie around the bark, and that's not a good sign. Some young trees are staked, and that's okay, but just remember, again, the principle of apical dominance. hopefully there is a central leader, whether it's a shrub or a tree. I'm taking large shrubs and trees. You want to make sure there's a central stalk. If you get multiple stalks coming out from one plant, you want just one single one, preferably. And you've got to watch if that was staked. And if you take a couple of the stakes off and the plant starts to flop over, it's been staked too long. You can train a small tree that's been like that, but it's harder because then you take it home and you've got to stake it here and then try to get it to stand up. And it's just be careful with small, thin staked trees, especially, that they may fall over once the stake is taken away because they've never had a chance to get wind to blow it, to get reaction wood to be able to stand up straight.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's definitely a lot of work. And of course, there's some plants that are grown as multi-trunked, either trees or shrubs or anything like that, and that's fine. Just make sure that each one that's coming out of the container is, separated from each other, and that they are straight and they're not crooked or have wounds on them or anything like that, that they're all evenly coming out of the container. And the root ball integrity. You got to look at the container and make sure that the plant is sitting correctly in a container, or if it's got a balled and burlapped plant, that when you push on the trunk of the tree, that it stays in place and doesn't move, because if it moves and the root ball stays in place, then it's most likely broken from that root ball, and you don't want that. And of course, the weeds. We just don't want weeds.
Definitely some in here.
I have enough weeds at home. I don't need more weeds.
You don't want to introduce any more?
I don't need any more. But and just watch when they're circling roots, and if you see roots at the surface of a container, that's a clue that it has been in that container for a long time. And sometimes the roots, as you can see, can cross over other roots, and that's going to end up girdling that tree eventually, or that large shrub. And you can cut those off, but I bet that nursery has been in the nursery for a very long time, and I would avoid that if I could and get one that doesn't have surface roots on it.
So if somebody wanted to try to, resurrect, these plants, I mean, they could.
They can, yeah, but just realize this one's got disease problems, and you're going to have to put some fungicide on this. And root rot is not, because we saw some live roots in this, it does have some hope, but I mean, it just depends on what you want to do. I don't particularly want to introduce more problems to my yard.
Yeah, you're right, because those spores could spread to your other plants. So you're exactly right. All right, Joellen, that was good. All right, so don't make these mistakes, right?
Don't make these mistakes. Don't buy these plants.
All right, thank you much. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. To find out more information on this topic, just click on the familyplotgarden.com link in the description.